With less than a month away from Mega Evolutions, the Pokemon TCG is in a bit of a transitional period, and today's deck, centered around everyone's favorite Loza King himself, Veluza, is one that not only will improve once Mega Evolutions is out, but potentially become an important piece of an S-tier deck. But without a few key elements to really make the deck work, the question becomes, is Veluza meta champion worthy with the cards that exist now? Or is it just on the verge of greatness, and until then, lives up to its name as a Veluza loser? I'll make a deck from scratch and put it to the ultimate test today in the 825 Deck Challenge. Alright, it is time to dive right in. Dive. Because it's a water deck. Anyways, this deck is one that you likely haven't seen anytime recently, if at all. And of course what brought us here today is the star of the hour, Veluza. Veluza is a basic Pokemon with 130 HP, and its attack, Sonic Edge, is a 4 colorless energy attack that does 110 damage and ignores any effects of your opponent's active Pokemon, meaning that even with its ability, it can take down the likes of Cornerstone Ogerpon. Now 4 energy is a lot of energy for a 110 damage attack, but as always, you gotta read the card. Check out this ability. It says, attacks used by this Pokemon cost a colorless energy less for each Kofu card in your discard pile. So hypothetically, if the deck runs 4 Kofus, which it does, and they are all in discard, Veluza can attack for free. No energy attached. Pretty big. Veluza isn't the only Pokemon that benefits from Kofus in discard. There's one more Pokemon, Crabominable. Crabominable? I'll do my best. Which evolves from Crabrawler. Crabrawler, oh boy, who has the same ability as Veluza, scrapping an energy on the attack for every Kofu in discard. Its attack, Haymaker, is a 5 energy attack with one of the energy being a water energy, and does 250 damage. So with all 4 Kofus in discard, for a single water energy attach, Haymaker is haymaking someone have a bad day with 250 damage. To help support the flow of the deck, I'm running 2 Tatsugiris, whose ability to attract customers almost serves as a Pokegear, where it searches the top 6 cards of the deck and allows you to keep one supporter card I find there. With an Air Balloon on it, I'd put it in inactive and use the ability consistently whenever my active Pokemon got knocked out by my opponent. This deck also ran the poison package of Brute Bonnet, whose ability lets it poison both active Pokemon so long as there's an ancient energy booster attached to the Brute Bonnet. I also ran a 2-2-2 of the Gengar line from Paldean Fates. This was a weird include, but let me explain here. The ability Nightgate gives me a free switch. The reason I ran this was because of Crabominable's 3 energy retreat and attack Haymaker, whose text also reads, this Pokemon can't attack on its next turn. Meaning if I wanted Crabominable to attack 2 turns in a row, I need a switch option to get it out of active and then be able to retreat whatever's inactive to be able to put Crabominable back into attack. The majority of my trainer cards were really all around enabling my Pokemon to attack for maximum damage. My Ace-Spec Brilliant Blender, which lets you discard up to 5 cards from your deck, was a very important trainer card here, as it would let me discard all of my Kofus in my deck and get my Pokemon attacking near immediately. To support the poison package, I had 2 Perilous Jungles, which adds an extra 2 damage counters onto non-dark poison Pokemon during the checkup phase. I also had Binding Mochi to allow both Veluza and Crabominable to hit far above their weight class. Binding Mochi does an additional 40 damage when the Pokemon is attached to its poison. I already mentioned the Air Balloon, which I have in the deck to help get Tatsugiri out of active after searching for a trainer. In the event of a Kofu stuck in my prizes, I ran a Redeemable Ticket to swap my prize cards out for the top cards from my deck. Oh, and Kofu, since most folks don't know what Kofu actually does, it's a real card that you can play. It lets you put 2 cards at the bottom of your deck and then draw 4. Not awful, but far more useful to me in discard. Otherwise, I played a lot of the expected, with plenty of Arvens, Ionos, and 2 Professor's Researches to rely on for additional discard and draw opportunities. Due to the nature of the deck, I played very little energy, because ideally, I wouldn't be needing much energy at all. So I ended up initially with only 6 water energy. Now, this deck had a lot of pieces, but did they all work together? It was time to get some experience and see how it all played. Veluza, I haven't really asked you, what do you think of the deck? I never have any idea what you're saying, but I'm sure I absolutely agree. What a pleasure to have you around. Veluza's words of inspiration stuck with me. In fact, they stuck with me so much that they must have also impacted my opponent in my first test match, because after I brilliant blended my Kofus, they wanted nothing to do with me and instantly conceded. Hoping to have more of a chance to learn the deck, I dove into my second match, which would be up against another rogue single prize deck, Weezing. It would make for an interesting matchup. I was going second, and right out of the gate, I would make a fumble of a play when I used this Ultra Ball. Knowing I'd want to discard the Kofu, but unsure what else I could discard, I landed on getting rid of my Redeemable Ticket, and would instantly regret it when I'd check my deck and see that my deck only had 2 other Kofus in it, meaning the fourth and final Kofu that would heavily enable my ability to attack was stuck in my prizes, and the only way for me to get it out of my prizes, aside from just knockouts, I just threw away. I used the rest of the turn to Arven for Brilliant Blender and put the 2 Kofus from my deck into discard, but with no access to energy, I had to pass. While my opponent continued to build the smoke-filled army, my opponent was also unable to pull off an attack, but didn't necessarily need to, because the Weezing stuck inactive had an ability that makes it so when I knock it out using damage from an attack, a coin is flipped, and if it lands on head, my active Pokemon that knocked out the Weezing is knocked out as well. Having played with the deck for a while myself, I know it's a scare tactic that typically scares people into not attacking at all, but where I already wasn't able to attack the previous turn, I needed to take the risk and take the knockout here and now. Luckily, the coin flipped tails, and my Veluza was safe, for now. I say for now because there was already a Team Rocket's Weezing fully set up that came back and quickly used its attack that does 40 damage for each coughing or wheezing that they have on their bench, and well, their bench was full with coughing and wheezings, and returned the KO onto my Veluza. Drawing into an Iono, I made what I'd consider to be my second mistake of the match, when instead of using Tatsugiri's ability in active to ideally retrieve something like an Arven to guarantee myself energy through Earthen Vessel, I Iono'd, giving me a hand arguably worse than the one before, and swapped in a Crabrawler to active as cannon fodder. Weezing swung for another knockout, and now that I was on the losing end of the prize trade against a single prizer, it was time to get serious. Arven allowed me to get Earthen Vessel and Ancient Booster, which combined with Binding Mochi enabled me to use Brute Bonnet's Toxic Powder ability to make Veluza poison and hitting for 150 for the return knockout on Weezing. We were just going back and forth, and would you look at that, as luck would have it, Kofu was my redeemed prize card. Things were starting to look up. As expected, the KO was then returned again from wheezing and coughing, and so I put Tatsugiri into active, and this turn is where everything would finally click. After so many agonizing turns, the deck was finally ready to shine, and it all started when I found Professor's research using Attract Customers with Tatsugiri, as it would let me not just discard the Kofu, but also draw 7 new cards from my deck, including a Crabrawler, who I tossed an energy on to be ready to go, the Gengar to give me the free switch for Veluza to go in, and a Binding Mochi to do the poison and knockout play I used last turn. Now the army of coughings and wheezings was growing smaller on the other side, but through some Night Stretchers and Super Rods, the deck got refilled with all these floating Grimace wannabes. They also used Team Rocket's Archer, resetting my hand to 3 cards, but the 3 cards I drew were very helpful. Interestingly, my opponent was able to attack this turn, but using the Weezing from 151, the one with the ability I mentioned earlier. Its attack does 50 damage to active and 10 to each of my benched Pokemon, so not even enough to KO the active Veluza. And I thought this might be my opening, as I kept the poison package going and hit for knockout, but I'd have to be up against a coin flip to determine if Veluza would get to live, and unfortunately the coin flip was not in my favor this time. My opponent came back up and still couldn't build enough of an attack to take out my now active Crabrawler. Again, I thought maybe this was my opening to get ahead on prizes, so I used Haymaker for the knockout on the active Weezing, and the coin flip didn't go in my favor again, so it put us both at 1 prize. And well, this time they had the tools that they needed to attack and get the knockout, leading to a loss for me. This was a very, very fun single prize matchup, which is why I wanted to take the time to highlight what I could. And I also quickly learned from my major discard mistakes and turn order choices. But in the second half, when the deck was truly up and running, the limited energy attach and major damage output really opens things up. The potential was there, I could see it. My third and final test match, I started with just a Crabrawler and Brute Bonnet for basics, and my opponent was running a Marnie's Grimmsnarl deck with a twist, as there was a Dano sitting on their bench. Huh, I was curious where they'd be going with that. Yeah, so this matchup did not go well. It took me 3 turns to get rid of all 4 of my Kofus, even though they were all in my deck, because I happened to draw into one of them, which really threw off the groove. My opponent played very slowly too though, making me think I had a chance. But then, once Grimmsnarl was unleashed, my deck started to waver, and even though I knocked out the initial Zweilous trying to get built into the Hydreigon, they got another one up quickly that did its crazy 130 damage to 3 Pokemon attack, ending the match. It was rough and very definitive. Getting rid of the Kofus really gatekept my deck, as my early game was preoccupied with that, giving my opponent plenty of time to get their ducks in a row, and oftentimes my opponent's ducks were more straight and obedient than my ducks, who seemed to be all over the place. Sorry, where was I? Right. I made some last-minute drastic changes to the deck I had been using. 2/2/2 Gengar line? Gone. And in came Night Stretcher, Super Rod, and Reversal Energy. The Gengar line was a great fantasy, but it was taking up a lot of real estate in the deck for what could just be a Switch or a Surfer. Without the Mega Evolution cards at my disposal, this deck felt half-baked, but I couldn't put this final match off any longer. Would Veluza live up to its name and be a Veluza loser? It was time to find out. Alright, so my final matches were weird. Anticlimactic? I mean, right off the bat, this happened. And in the past, I've taken a concede as an auto-meta champion, but in this case, where the opponent clearly didn't even see what deck I was playing and likely just needs to go eat a sandwich or something like that, I decided for a real litmus test, I'd do another match. And this one was against a formidable opponent, the current king of the TCG Live Ladder, Gholdengo. The Joltik box variant featured at Worlds, which meant it would get set up quickly, and so I would need to move at a pace to match. My starting hand was very lucky, as I had a Veluza army and the Tatsugiri with Air Balloon, which would give me consistent supporter search pretty much every turn. Unfortunately, I was going first here and unable to use the Iono in my hand, so I just attached Air Balloon and passed. With my opponent having Pikachu inactive, I figured their turn would likely be getting Jolting Charge out, and I wouldn't see any damage thrown my way, which would be correct. As predicted, they charged up Iron Hands and got their bench almost filled out. Knowing that Ampy very much would be coming at me next turn, I used my opponent's Artazon to get a Crabrawler set up, as Crabominable would be vital in taking out the Iron Hands. After Iono, I was able to also Earthen Vessel away Kofu number 1, and then attach a Water Energy to Crabrawler, hoping Reversal Energy combined with Crabominable in hand next turn would be perfect. Iron Hands made its way to active, and with 4 energy on it and my active Veluza weak to electricity, I assumed his attack Ampy Very Much was going to fry my Veluza, as Ampy Very Much allows Iron Hands to take an extra prize card for a knockout. Instead though, they used their attack Arm Press, which meant that they only took 1 prize card. This was very confusing to me, and the only thing I can think of is that potentially they didn't realize weakness and just clicked away, but it shows you damage amount when you go to attack, so I'm still kinda confused on why this happened. I'm not really sure. Either way, I was now up, and Crabominable was going to get into action. But before that, I'd use Tatsugiri's Errand Run to grab an Iono and set up my board and work through my cards even more, attaching some Binding Mochis, using Artazon to get Brute Bonnet ready to poison, and finally, making a mess out of Iron Hands and getting the KO to bring me to 4 prizes. Gholdengo came up, and using Superior Energy Retrieval, it's almost like me knocking out Iron Hands and putting that energy in discard was doing Gholdengo a favor rather than a disservice, as I gathered tons of energy and was able to knock out Crabominable and then some, swinging for an outstanding 400 damage. Finally, with Arven in hand, for the first time all game, it was time to get rid of the Kofus using Brilliant Blender and ensure multiple Crabominables would be getting set up for endgame. I used the Binding Mochi and Brute Bonnet to do 160 damage to the active Gholdengo, but it wouldn't get me a knockout. The endgame was heating up, and then, after a full turn of movements before swinging, my opponent conceded. I'm not sure if they found something was prized, or realized they'd likely be getting a one-hit KO, or needed to join that other guy for a sandwich. I really am kinda confused. I'm not sure, but either way, we played out most of the match, and Veluza, at the end of the day, got the win. Which ironically means Veluza is a meta champion. Bring in the sandwiches. I know this video has been long, but I feel like there's so much I'd have to say about this deck still that I haven't said, so I'm gonna try to use these scores best to say it. For fun factor, I'd give this deck an 8 out of 10. It's fun when it works. What isn't fun though is finding out you have a Kofu in prizes and then having to expand a number of resources just to get it out of prizes and into discard. For flow factor, with the changes I made, I'd say it's currently at like a 7 out of 10. It's definitely better, and the groove I found the last matchup using Tatsugiri searching out a supporter every time my Pokemon gets KO'd was a perfectly adequate draw engine. I just found myself stuck at a number of points, all due to Kofu's not being in discard, and that piece makes the deck flow not incredibly well. For win equity in this current iteration, even though I won the final matchup, I can honestly give it probably a 6 out of 10, and here's why. Against Goldengo, if set up, which is a big if, the Haymaker and Poison combo does really well. Against something like Noir Pult, where damage is flying everywhere, or Frostlass Monkey Dory with all the abilities, this deck sets my opponent up for 3 or 4 prizes very easily, giving this deck an average of 7 out of 10. And all this to say, I think this deck has incredible potential. Like I mentioned at the top of the video, and I've mentioned a few times, the Mega Evolution trainer cards coming out next month can really juice up parts of this deck that might make it more janky. Specifically the Water Stadium that will give switch capabilities to allow for Crabominable to be more viable early game to potentially hit twice, and the new Lily's Determination, which will usually serve as an Iono, but with more card draw will be fantastic. I'm actually planning to try and run it on live and at some challenges once Mega releases to see if I can get this deck where I really want it. The last thing to do before packing it in is spinning the wheel to see which Pokemon I'll have to create a deck around next week. Ralts, the basic Pokemon who grows into the current world champion Gardevoir. I've played a decent amount of Gardevoir, and well, let me tell you, the deck I'm gonna build, I promise you, is not gonna be your average Gardevoir deck. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time on the 825 Deck Challenge.